He's VP of Research and Development, so he's got a pretty sorted out life. And where better to do it than at O2. O2 I have enormous fondness for. I'm old enough to remember going to Ad Astra Park, years ago, and one of my tasks there was I had to judge the innovative projects people were doing. They'd all come up and say, this is what I'm planning to do, and I had to make some decision about whether they should go ahead or not. Most extraordinary time, because every single person who walked through the door was just chock full of ingenious ideas, and it was impossible to refuse any of them, which I never did. O2 sprung out of all that, and some of the genius remains, and Mike is some of it. Mike, welcome for the last session today.
Thanks very much for the introduction, and it's great to be here. I was, oops, just too quickly. I generally talk about applications anywhere, anytime, because I think that's the world we're in today. But I thought, given that this was by nature an educational conference, I would talk about technologies for learning, but not just for secondary schools or further education. I thought I'd talk about learning for life. Now let me just give you a few reasons why I can talk about that. First of all, just a quick ramp through some trials that we've been doing in the last 3 months. We've been trying some devices that in effect are cell phones that project onto walls. And you start to imagine if you have a cell phone that not only lights up to show what your content is, but you can project it onto a wall. That's a very interesting concept in a classroom. We've been looking at some motion detectors or motion sensors, a little bit like the Nintendo Wii, but where the motion sensors are inside the cell phone, and where you can start to imagine how creatively that may impact art. We announced yesterday something called FitPhone. I have to say that very carefully, because the first time I said fat phone, they said, no, that's the opposite effect. But this FitPhone is trialling with 200 people, 200 volunteers, their metabolic energy levels, including navigation in Dublin. And we announced the trial yesterday, and we'll release the results in mid-November. The aim of that is to test what is their metabolic rate when stationary, where do they move, and what is their energy consumption over time. It may help with healthcare, but it also may help with biological teaching. We're also doing a trial supported by the Department of Transport all around pollution, measuring pollution by time of day and by location in Cambridge. Mobile can do that today. It's not mass market, but actually it's a very interesting trial. We've also done some trials for future car mechanics, looking at how they can access the history of a car on the web, so that wherever you are in the world, you know what that car is, some of the characteristics of that car, maybe some of its history. It's more of a social network. It's no longer just the manual that's difficult to read. There is advice, there is support, and that's an EU-funded project called My Car Event. We're also doing some trials with payment systems. We're also doing lots of trials with navigation. So mobile will touch every part of society. Hopefully that's an indication from that brief list. Let's give a few indications as to how it'll get there. I used to be chairman of the GSM Association worldwide some 11 years ago. And I remember when GSM went through 10 million customers, and I was asked, how long will it take you to get through 100 million GSM customers? I said, well, 4 or 5 years. It took 3. Between 1995 and 1998, it went from 10 million to 100 million customers, and we can see that the global total will go through 3.3 billion this year. Now, when thinking about 2012, it's quite important to say, well, it's not just a scale phenomenon for Europe. GSM's origins are in Europe, certainly, but it's been adopted globally. So GSM is in more countries than the United Nations, 218 today, and the expectation is that by 2010, all mobile phones will have mobile internet and mobile email capability. That's available to everybody. Clearly, the choice is increasing very dramatically. Because GSM is 20 years old, last month, September 07, I was asked to make a keynote address at the Institute of Electronic Engineers, more recently termed IET, in Savoy Place. And I was asked to characterize the phases of growth. So without going through all these phases, I think we're in phase 6 now. It's the data phase. And you can see significant growth happening in terms of data applications. Non-voice maybe, but generally a lot of data activities, whether it be to do with mobile internet, mobile email, and indeed mobile content in its broadest sense. What we're also moving into, though, is a phase 7, which is a much more applications-rich world, much more user-generated content, more camera phone technology, more individual-generated content. It's no longer just a question of access. It's also going to move us into, in the 2012 timeframe, a connected world which is about digital health, digital education, digital transport, digital money. And I think the issue about looking at devices alone is only a very one small part of the story. It's about partnerships to deliver this digital world of the 21st century, not the last century. If we go back briefly in time, we can see how we've taken lessons from around the world. I mean, I've been in mobile long enough to know that we looked to the USA in the 1980s, but that soon disappeared as we looked towards leading markets like the Nordic countries, Italy and Portugal, particularly for prepay phones and prepay ideas, but also increasingly in the early part of this decade to Northeast Asia, parts of Korea and Japan in particular. They have some very advanced mobile payment ideas, and some of those ideas will come to Europe. But increasingly, the world of mobile is being driven on the device side and on the infrastructure side by countries like China and India. In China alone, they were connecting 6 million customers a month last year and have just been overtaken by India, who are now connecting at a faster rate given the number of customers they now have in India. So India went through 200 million customers in September. They grew last year faster than the UK has grown in the last 20 years. China went through 500 million in September, again, the largest GSM market in the world. So ideas can come from anywhere in terms of the technology, in terms of the applications. I was very pleased to take part in the announcement with LP Plus only 10 days ago about setting up an educational virtual learning environment in China to serve 20 million Chinese people. And when you start to imagine that, that means that the nature of education and ideas for education can come from anywhere. We also see that in China, some of the decisions that they make about 4G and about mobile TV will have a big impact over here in Europe as well. So what does this mean in terms of choice? Some of the devices in the mobile world that now exist, because it's so huge, there are over 2,000 devices to choose from in the GSM world. As O2, we range over 70 devices. We also covering an increasing range of 3G devices, the wideband CDMA devices, and indeed the HSDPA and HSUPA devices soon to arrive. So the choice of devices is increasing, so I don't think that, frankly, will be the bottleneck. What I think may be the bottleneck in terms of adoption education is really the creativity that we apply to using this technology. So 20 years of GSM. If I was to go forward 5 years, where will we be? In 2012, certainly we expect to see around 5 billion devices in use worldwide. But I think it's notable that there are more machines than people on this planet. 10 times more machines than people. So even if there are 6.6 billion people, we see a huge adoption between the machine community and the machine community. Car parks, for example, today already can notify if the coin box is full or the coin chute is jammed. Thank God, you may say. You can pay for your parking already in central London. The possibility of your fridge telling your phone, top me up, that's not so very far away. So the pace at which this industry changes is very rapid. It's very difficult to predict precisely what will be there, but we need to prepare our children and our children's children for this future world. Could you imagine that 5 years ago there would have been a book that's coming out in November, great stocking filler, how to take a mobile camera picture with a mobile phone? I remember 6 years ago when texting started to lift and started to really grow in the early part of this decade. There were lots of little books that came out initially saying, how do you abbreviate to fit into those 160 characters? And many of them became bestsellers, and even text poetry became an interesting article in the newspapers. But this literally is the first book I've seen on camera phone technology. So the creativity will be encouraged by books such as this, and I would recommend it for £4.99 as a simple stocking filler as well as an educational tool. But the mobile hub that we have is much more than voice and text and cameras. And when we look at the sort of content that we share, the content that we carry, the content that we might consume, it's much more than a world of text and pictures. We already can see devices which will combine the capability to pay for things, such as mobile money, with near-field communications, the capability to look at contacts and calendars. My PDA has all of those today. Certainly when we look towards the future, as the displays get bigger, the possibility of both capturing photographs and sharing photographs, or as I prefer to say, snap, send and share, will increase. The possibility of television on your mobile phone, as referred to briefly by Derek Williamson, we've trialled in Oxford only at the turn of Christmas last year. And the interest we had was enormous, not just in terms of publicity, but from all the trialists who generally said they'd like it and they'd like it now. Not everybody wants to dress or carry all this luggage. The reality is we have to optimize it for the educational environment as much as we have to adopt it and adapt it for the business and consumer environments. But most of the things that this guy or this cartoon geek is carrying or wearing, we can do today. Technology is not the issue, it's user acceptance, it's the user interface, it's making sure that we can handle some of these solutions in a cost-effective way for customers, whether they be in education or in business life or elsewhere. And the way we do this is typically to match devices to times online, to the amount of types of devices or price points that would be relevant, to the types of services they might want, to the types of functions or usage patterns. And education is no different. You know, when I talk to businessmen who have a skills challenge, we typically get to this map pretty quickly. What type of device type would suit your time online, would suit your price points, and so on. Now, it's not a technical debate, it's just a very practical usage debate. And I think what we're going to see is that the range, both left and right, will widen much more significantly, and the depth will widen and deepen more significantly as well. Incidentally, all these slides I'm very happy to give away to anybody who gives me a card afterwards or leaves a card at the O2 stand, and that O2 stand just outside describes some things we're doing more specifically in education. But one of the things we're very pleased about is that Apple, for the iPhone, chose to launch it with O2 here in the UK. November the 9th, you can pre-register if you would like one. Ever since this was announced only 10 days ago, I've had 4 requests for research proposals to put educational material on the iPhone. 4 in barely 10 days. Quite simply, it's a fantastic device. I'm sorry I can't show you one physically today. Most of the devices we've got are either with our retail stores for training, so it's ready for the launch. But in terms of the capability in an educational setting with a device such as that, the mind will start to really stretch. We also have other devices. These are Windows Mobile 6 compatible. Many of these are in use in some educational colleges and schools today, and we expect this sort of area and choice to grow very dramatically. We have a long-standing partnership with Microsoft, which we're very proud of as well. So some of the applications, I think we see, not as educationalists, that we're not experts in this field, but I think we see evidence that the left-hand side has already started and the right-hand side is coming. I don't propose to go through all these bullet points, but clearly mobile has a big part to play in handheld learning for many years to come. However, I think what's quite important is that educational institutions take a complete mobility strategy think piece to it in terms of what are the likely applications that could be used. So there's a kind of broad plan, a framework that gives flexibility to both start and develop and grow. Flexibility that allows connectivity when connectivity is needed, but in particular provides for strong thinking about the digital content that may be needed and the digital content that needs to be shared. A lot of the technology will enable a lot more, but it's the digital content that needs attention. We also treat corporate responsibility very sensitively, and I've just taken one of our leaflets off our websites to show you this slide, but this particularly shows the depth that we've put into thinking about awareness, so information available to parents and guardians or teachers, some of the things that we can do in terms of barring and blocking and filtering, some of the solutions that may be relevant for age verification when it comes to certain types of content. And indeed we work cross-industry, all the operators together, on some of the age verification and labelling processes. We all work with Ofcom, who are our primary regulator here in the UK, and we make sure that therefore we comply with best practice that's known. I personally was involved with and was the first mobile operator to join the Internet Watch Foundation, and in addition to that I was on the Home Office Internet Task Force for Child Protection some 7 years ago. So we treat this very seriously and very deeply. We also internally within O2 have now over 100 children's champions. They are champions for children who may have some issues to do with bullying or issues to do with concern where there's some other form of abuse. Maybe phone theft may have occurred. So children's champions who are able to talk to children or indeed their parents if issues arise either in schools or colleges. Our Nuisance Call Bureau is this year 10 years old. 10 years old because we have treated the etiquette all around the use of mobile phones very seriously, whether it be spam or bullying or anything of that nature. A very deep public policy and mobile content or LBS, location-based services codes. So to us, we think it's very important to put the applications together with the responsibility in a broader connected learning environment. Again, not just the technology, but looking at the partners you need, some of the responsibility, and some of the solutions together. So the world we're moving into is one where there are bound to be multiple devices. Cellular, Wi-Fi, and indeed in the future 4G and mobile TV will all coexist. These capable devices will multiply. It would not surprise you to know that over 1 billion cell phones are being shipped every year worldwide now, and that's expected to reach 1.2 billion next year. So therefore some of the solutions for voice or data are going to multiply. We're very pleased to have committed recently to a partnership with LP Plus on the virtual learning environment, and we'll have other partners in this particular space to support education. Because I think we also accept that whilst we know some of the network technology, some of the public policy areas, and indeed the device areas, we need key partners in education. We also believe combining the knowledge together with those partners, we can make 1 + 1 = at least 3, if not a lot more. But we also believe that if we're not in this space, we're not providing the tools for the children of tomorrow, for the skills that they're going to need tomorrow. So some of the items on the right-hand side we continue to treat as part of this environment for all our customers, direct or indirect. So in summary, I think we see a world of global growth where mobile is here to stay for many, many years to come. If I was to go beyond 2012, some people will say, how long will it be before everybody has a mobile phone? Well, clearly there's always a choice, but it's quite interesting when you look to some environments, like the car environment, to see how many cars are not even properly connected today. And it's about time we perhaps got some more education into the car community about making them better integrated for better use, such as navigation and internet on wheels and better connectivity. But generally the global growth we can see reaching to everybody on this planet within 7 years if the customers would need them. And when you, as I have done, go to countries like Africa and parts of Asia, and you see that the first phone call is being made generally through mobile, it really is changing society forever. The first form of access for many people to the internet is through mobile, and has already overtaken forms of fixed access by a number of connections. What we're moving into, therefore, is a world of personalized and shared learning, where a lot of content will be pushed as well as pulled, created anywhere, anytime, any place. The reality is we need to embrace the tools of today for the skills of tomorrow. We'd like to play our part. Any partners we're happy to work with, please see me afterwards if you need the slides. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
I must say, Mike, when you look at the way that places like Kenya have been just transformed economically by the penetration of portable, pocketable devices, you see farmers dealing directly with their buyers instead of having to go through an oligopoly of wholesalers who rob them blind. You know, you just see whole economies being turned around, and I think that revolution of transparency that you alluded to so well there, where everybody sees everything, is just an extraordinarily powerful thing. But it wasn't me.
I don't think it was me.
Well, actually, you might think I'm fat, but actually I'm storing up for future. I'm anticipating future power consumption from mobile devices, and this is my storage. You know? I hope it all goes my way. So there's maybe a glitch. You know. Let's go to some questions, and the canapes are wafting, but they're not quite here yet. Oh, one question. Right, one question. Let's go to one question, which had better be a perfect one. And I'm going to nominate Carol to ask it from the front row.
The microphone's coming.
You have a moment while the microphone comes.
Yeah, hi, I'm Carol Fletcher from Intuitive Media. We run social learning networks for children, and safety is our biggest issue, of course. But we also would like to see more and more children have the ability to be social networking and have friends around the world. So interested in the children's champions and how they engage with children and how they stimulate what happens.
We do school visits. We've been to young offenders institutions, prisons. We occasionally have discussion groups in our own premises with parental permission. Clearly, when it comes to thinking about demand, it's quite important to understand how children think in this area. We also have worked with ChildNet International. Stephen Carrick-Davis, I think, is speaking tomorrow. So I think we take a variety of approaches, because I don't think there's one standard way to do it. but I think it's very important that we understand how children use devices, and I think we've got a good understanding of that today, and I'm sure it will evolve. In terms of children's needs, I don't think they're actually very different from adults' needs. I think, though, they can teach us a lot rather than us just learning from them. We did a campaign some 6 years ago, I think it was, called Teach Your Mum to Text, where we actually got children to teach their parents how to do texting, because there was an embarrassment, but there also was a benefit in finding teachers teaching their mothers or fathers how to do texting, so that the embarrassment could be overcome, but communications in the family could be improved. We've also, as an industry, supported the BBC for their Talking Teenagers campaign, which involved email. And I would like to probably do something more with the BBC or an organisation like that to try and encourage more community discussions, to try and improve and overcome the difficulties associated sometimes with technology. You know, we love technology, but at the end of the day, it's got to have a purpose. It's got to have a benefit and a need. So that's the way we treat it.
And just for what it's worth, I mean, Bob and Carol there probably know more than anybody in Britain about online communities for children. I've been doing some of that work with the BBC, so you guys should swap cards at the end for sure. Listen, thank you, mate. That's terrific. And thank you all for being here. Heroic session. I just 2 seconds of summary. I mean, I think what technology does to learning is it softens and blurs all the edges. You know, the places you learn, who you learn with, the times you learn, the subjects slip into project-based work, all the edges are softening in a rather nice way. What I think you've seen this afternoon with technology is just the same thing. Of course, there is no clear motorway of the future from here to 2012, but of the 360 degrees of possibility that you might have come here thinking about, I reckon you're down to about 45 degrees of certainty now. You know roughly the wedge you're heading for, and you know what that looks like. And funnily enough, you know that as well about learning. Put those two together, and I think you've got a very clear guideline from this afternoon about where this is going, what difference it's going to make to learners, and what difference it's going to make to learners' lives. So for me, it's been an absolute fab afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for answering the questions. Whoever got the puck last, it's yours. Thank you. Canapes are being served. That's why Graham came in and warned us to finish early. So sprint down there quick and fill your faces and your pockets, indeed, and have a good journey tonight.
And thank you to the chairman as well for keeping us all in order. Thank you.